We're streaming to YouTube. We're ready when you are.
Okay. I'll call this work session to order. It's 5:30 on Monday, February 24th, 2025. And we have a work session to hear a project update on the infrastructure plans with Seward Electric System. So I'm going to turn it over to the city manager to tell us what's happening.
Great, thank you so much, Madam Mayor. So tonight we're going to have Brian Hickey, the manager of the electric utility, go through an update on our infrastructure project and plans for next steps. Brian, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you for the opportunity to present this. And I'll just kind of walk through these slides. I'm not going to read them because I know you're all good at reading, but I'll try to hit the high points and keep moving. We'll talk a little bit about what the objective of the project, I'll say the projects. It was considered called the infrastructure project, but it has many components to it. We'll talk a little bit about the objective, the scope, schedule, where we're at as far as costs, and then where we're at as far as funding. And then if you have any questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer them. Primarily, obviously, safety is number one. There are several safety issues, particularly with the substations that need to be addressed related to ground grids and fencing. So those are being replaced. There were some number of poles that were power poles that were compromised, and by putting in more modern equipment, you'll actually have greater operator situational awareness. So actually, our outage response times will be quicker, because we'll be able to see where faults and short circuits are. We'll replace some equipment, a bunch of the equipment that's at the end of its useful life. A lot of the transformers and poles and stuff are 50 plus years old. And then we're going to convert the system from 69,000 volts to 115,000 volts, which has a number of benefits. One, it reduces losses, but more important, 69 kV isn't really used much in the industry anymore, and it's hard to get. In state, I think the only 69 line remaining is from Cooper Lake up to Quartz Creek. Everything else has been converted to 115. So if you have to get spare parts and stuff, it's a challenge. In addition to that, the upgrade to 115, and this is an important part of it, we have to complete the upgrade to 115 before we complete the shore power project. And the shore power project needs to be completed by 12/31/27. That's the $45 million grant. So making this all come together over this period of time is going to be, it's doable right now, but it won't be, if we wait another year, it will be challenging to make it doable. So we really need to get after it. So I'll just kind of walk through the components of the project, and some of these were done before I got here. I sort of came in after Nash Road Phase 1 had been done. So converting the poles and wires from 69 kV to 115 kV involves upgrading the line from Long Substation into Fort Raymond, and then from the tap at the Seward Highway out to Spring Creek Substation along Nash Road. Those were all 69,000 volt lines. They have to be upgraded to 115,000 volt. They also have communications and distribution underbuilt on them. And you'll see when we get to the Nash Road Phase 2, our preliminary estimate was about $1 million short of what our final design estimate is. And that's because a number of poles had to be replaced to get clearance for the underbuild of the distribution and the communications below that. That wasn't in when they did the walkthrough sort of pre-feasibility or feasibility design. They didn't think they'd have to replace as many poles. This was our engineering firm, EPS, but we'll get to that. So there's that conversion to 115, which, as I noted, involves transmission rebuild, distribution, and then there's an additional air brake switch that we're going to add at Seward Highway. Nash Road Phase 1, go ahead.
Can I ask what an air brake switch is?
Sure, it's sorry. If any of that kind of stuff, so I just rattle on about this stuff. It's a large, you'll see large mechanical devices way up on the top of poles, and they open the circuit in the air. They're not under oil like an oil circuit breaker would be, or under sulfur hexafluoride. They just open it up in the air. And so you see them, well, there's one right on where you go into Fort Raymond. There's one up on the pole up there. If you drive out, if you're like if you're not watching the road and you're and you're staring at the transmission lines, you would see one on the left just as you go past Fort Raymond. But it's a large switch that's mounted up at the top of the pole. And the one that we're going to put at the Seward High will be what we call a non-load break switch. And that means you can't interrupt load with it, but if there were a short circuit on that line going out to Nash, we could send a crew there, they could open that switch, that would be out of power, and then we could re-energize everyone else in Seward. So it's that you use it for troubleshooting and operations. So we're going to add a switch there.
Thank you.
Now the phase 1 of Nash Road, which goes from Spring Creek to Sawmill Creek, is completed. And phase 2, which we're going to talk about, goes from Sawmill Creek to the Seward Highway and includes the air brake switch. Fort Raymond required a significant amount of work. We replaced the power transformers there, ground grid, fencing, and we put in new circuit breakers, put in more sophisticated protective devices to see faults, short circuits more quickly, and clear the faults with more selectivity, so we have outages involve less customers. But that work is done, so Fort Raymond is complete, and we'll talk about that when we get to the budget side of this. We finished that in August of this year. Lawing Substation, which is out, if you've driven by it, it's mile 20, 25, somewhere out there on the left side, just before you get to Trail Lake. That substation was where we stepped down from 115,000 volts that came down from Dave's Creek, which is up in Cooper Landing. We were 115,000 volts to Long, and then we stepped down to 69. And we also have a tap off of that back feeds. It feeds Primrose and Moose Pass and allows us to back feed the Chugach system at a lower voltage. So that transformer is going to be removed, and the new transformer is going to be put in, and will be 115 right through that sub, with a tap down to distribution there. So that's a complete rebuild of that sub, replacement of the ground grid, the fencing. The pad is actually going to have to be expanded a little bit, and a control room will be put in there. That project right now, and you'll see when we get to the slide, I believe it's 11, that's at about 25% design right now. The 25% drawings are in for review, and so we're still in the preliminary phases of fleshing that out. We had R&M out there, and they surveyed the lot. There were some issues we had to deal with the homeowner there. There was some confusion as to where the lot line, where it had been actually staked and where it's really surveyed, but I think we've got all that resolved now, and we're ready to move forward. Spring Creek is out, over by Jag on the other side in the SMIC over there. Same story, and when you look at these substations and you see flowers inside the fence, there are not supposed to be any. You're supposed to have a ground grid and dry gravel in there to prevent step and touch potential is what they call it. It's a safety issue. So we'll be replacing all of that, pulling that out, putting a ground grid in, an enhanced ground grid, and then gravel, and there'll be a circuit switcher, a sulfur hexafluoride switching device, not an air brake switching device, installed there as well. Yeah.
Sorry. And then, so if we're looking at the, Mayor.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I hate to go backwards, but if we're looking at the scope of the
lawn?
Thank you.
Lawn.
Thank you. I'm staring right at it. Thank you. And I see lots of vegetation inside of that as well, so that's part of
that. All needs, that needs to come out, and really what you need is
because it's a fire hazard, I suppose.
Well, and when, without getting into too much detail, when a short circuit occurs somewhere out on the system, all the fault current goes through that substation into the ground and spreads out.
Okay.
And you don't want to have conductive vegetation where you're stepping between two conductive places when a short circuit occurs. That creates a high voltage, which is a safety hazard.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I explained that very clearly, but that's the reason you have you'll have washed, chipped rock, about a foot of that. You'll basically take it out, put a copper grid in the ground, wash, chipped rock above that, so that the water just drains away. And if you're in the substation, there's no potential what we call step or touch potentials.
Perfect, thank you.
And there's an IEEE spec on that. It's very, this is all, guys have figured this out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
So, yeah, Lawing Spring, see the same thing at Spring Creek. That'll be converted, and we'll put in the new, more advanced protective devices there. The cruise ship shore power project, that involves a 115 kV line that will run from Fort Raymond across the highway. It's about 3/4 of a mile total. We'll run from Fort Raymond across the highway and follow the edge of the, as you can see in the, I don't think that doesn't work on the screen up there, but it follows the edge of the Alaska Railroad property down to the corner of Ship Avenue there. A substation where you see two yellow circles with white dots in them. One of those will be a battery energy storage system. It'll be 12 megawatts and have energy for 2 hours. So our peak here is about 8 megawatts. So it'll actually be able to carry the city of Seward for about 2 hours. There's some technical things we'll have to work out as far as how that'll work, but I believe it will be able to do that. If it can't sustain us through the outage, then you'll be able to turn the battery on and pick everything up. There may be a momentary outage. There's some issues with using batteries without rotating equipment, but we'll figure all that stuff out. So go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you again. So does that mean that that's possible 2 hours that we don't turn on our generators?
Yes.
And that's substantial, correct?
Yeah, yes, and potentially, we'll get the line back before that.
Yeah.
Ideally, it doesn't trip out at all, but there's I won't give the details, but there are technical issues around going through a fault like that with a battery.
But just 2 hours of savings in fuel alone.
Yeah, and what it'll allow us to do is integrate the big ships in here without voltage fluctuations. So during the period, from May through October, when the cruise ships are in, the battery's resources will be dedicated to the cruise ships. But from November through April, we'll be able to use it as a grid asset for reg into the system, as well as to support the outages here, support losing outages. So that's an interesting project, and I think it's a $45 million grant. We have, with a 10% match, we're at about $50.7 million. Of that, $30 million will be electrical infrastructure, about $15 million for the transmission line, the substation, and the battery energy storage system is an additional 12 to 15 million. And then there's another 10 to 15 million for expanding the terminal or the dock itself, and then putting in the low voltage equipment to actually connect to the ships. That'll all be done by the Seward Company. Everything downstream of the substation.
Yeah, can I just, since we're on this topic here, a couple questions. When I was at the Soldotna plant for the Tesla batteries there, which are 100 megawatts, I can't remember.
No, they're 40.
40.
Yeah.
The one thing that the huge asset for them and their whole grid, we talked about that grid regulation, is that applied to the 12 megawatt system too,
Yes.
in terms of flattening out the spikes
Exactly.
and making the whole system more efficient?
Yep, and more stable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then will the rail belt use R12? Will it be valuable?
Yeah,
as an
I
asset?
think that during the months when it's not dedicated to cruise ship,
Yeah.
I think we will be able to sell reg, it's called regulation.
Right.
We call it reg for short, but
Yeah.
regulation is our ability to manage load versus generation. And every utility is required to have a certain amount of that. Generally, ours is covered by Chugach under the power sales agreement, but we'll actually be able to sell it through Chugach into the grid as reserves. So there will be some income coming off that. Now, there's some background work that has to be done to make that happen as far as controls and being able to monitor it and all that stuff. But yeah,
That's good.
It's
Yeah,
just,
good.
it was interesting because I watched the graph on that and their big grid, their
Control room.
computer control room. It was pretty cool to look at that.
Yeah.
That how it ironed out that fluctuations,
Yeah.
which puts less load on your system, right, in terms of your transformers and things.
it minimizes, it mostly saves you fuel, because otherwise you have to regulate that with some rotating machine somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's a gas turbine or a machine somewhere in the system is unloaded and waiting for that load to change so it can come up and reg it. So the battery can reg it without using fuel. So that's the biggest savings
So on that note, so we have what, we have 4 generators or 3?
Six.
6?
Yeah.
So
2.6
we typically power up 2 probably for a power outage, or we
No,
don't do 6?
basically there's 16 megawatts there. We would run 4 of them in a typical outage. 5, ideally we'll start them all and keep them so that there's some regulating room on them, because we have to regulate when we're islanded. We're doing that regulation here as well. With the battery, you won't have to do that. The battery will do the regulation for you.
Okay, last question, sorry. On these batteries, I've been asked, like, is this becoming an asset of our system?
Yes.
So if we ever wanted to sell this system again, that would be part of our assets.
Yep.
So we own that.
I think there's, in the grant, there's 3 years or something you have to keep it for. There's a number in the grant, I think it's 3 years that you have to keep for before you can sell it, but, yeah.
And will there be upkeep in the future for that?
Yeah.
Will at some point we have to change out that?
Well, we have to change them out. They have and it depends on how we buy them. There are different contracts, so we can buy them, and they'll start out at 20 megawatts, and about 20 years from now, there'll be 17 or 15 megawatts in them. Or you can buy them, and they'll size them to 25 now, and by the time the maintenance contract's over, they'll be at 20. And obviously, it costs more to buy that.
That's a 20-year.
Yeah, it's a 20-year asset, though.
Okay.
Nice.
So yeah, that's the shore power project, and yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun, kind of interesting. It puts us I think it puts us on the map. This is a new project that we added to the infrastructure project this year. It's advanced metering infrastructure, and this kind of goes right to the heart of to the consumers and how they see us and how we operate. The meters that we're currently using are called automated AMR, automated meter reading. They're read by Kari, who drives a truck around, and if you get within the radio signal and the meter's working, you can download the information. She brings it back, puts it on a standalone computer, and manipulates it. And then we find that 60 to 80 of the meters aren't read every month, and so then she has to go out and actually read those meters. The net metering, where we have people who have solar panels on their houses on their side of the meter. The meters don't accommodate that, and the meters, because they're old, we got them from Kodiak Electric, and I don't know if we paid for them or if they gave them to us. I wasn't here then, but they're not supported by Itron in a meaningful way. Let me put it that way. You can find people around the country who work on them. Long story short, metering has moved on from that now. With advanced metering infrastructure, basically the meters are put in to the houses. They talk to each other and to collectors, and the collectors go to head ends, and the head end comes back to the office. And no one goes out and drives around. The systems are sort of self-healing because the meters talk through each other to the collectors, so they have multiple paths back to the head end. And what you get with that is a couple things. You have two-way communications. One thing is we can then disconnect people from the office and reconnect them from the office, rather than right now where we send a line crew out and they pull the meter on the house and then they send it back out and they put the meter back in. You'll be able to do that remotely. There's a meter data management system that comes with it where consumers can call in and they can look at what they're actually using in almost real time. And if their bill goes crazy, when they just plug the electric heater in, they can see that happening. So there's a consumer interface portion of it. And also, it's, what we have right now isn't well maintained. It isn't, it's beyond the end of its useful life, and it's not well maintained by the manufacturer. So I think it's worthwhile moving to this, that, get to the financials on this. We did a budgetary quote. It's about a $1 to $1.2 million project to convert all the meters, put in the collectors and the head end. I recommend you do it. I mean, the world has gone to that place. No one's using AMR meters. That's why Kodiak gave them to you back whenever they did.
So it's just a bit concerning, because I was on council when we got those, and that was the big thing. We were told that, they would be useful for a long time. Well, we were told that, and that's kind of disconcerting, so
Yeah.
$1.2 million mistake?
I'm not, I wouldn't.
Well, it was within, I've been on less than 10 years, so
wasn't that long ago.
within this last.
And I don't know what you paid for them, or if they were,
Yeah, we didn't, I'm trying to remember, I don't know off the top of my head what that scenario was, but we didn't pay $1.2 million for the
No,
Kodiak
I'm talking
meters.
about
But,
what we're talking.
yeah, and so this, I wouldn't refer to this as a $1.2 million mistake. It is a $1.2 million investment in our utility and our customers, rather than
This,
an upgrade.
this current
Yes.
thing, but I'm talking about the former
Right, but
meters.
when we got this, it was better than what we had.
Well,
Yeah.
it was definitely
Oh,
better
yeah.
than we had.
Yeah.
This was a lot better than what we had.
yeah, people were, probably 7 or 8 years ago, Chugach went from AMR to AMI. Most folks in the industry have moved away from that.
So
You know,
that
you
would be
went from-
about the time we went to AMR then.
You went from manual meter reads where you had
Yeah,
three
I
or
mean, it
four
was an
people who went
upgrade at
around
the
and
time.
wrote the number down. Then we went to AMR where you could drive around and pick them up. And now,
Right.
with AMI, you basically have a lot of, first of all, I think that one of the best things is that you can disconnect people without going
Yeah.
out to their house. And that's always a challenge with dogs and guns and all the things that people have. When you're sending people into their house to turn their power off, it's never a good situation.
Oh, go ahead.
Quick question for administration. Could we get, not right now, but for later, how much we paid for those?
Yes.
And when? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Thank you.
And that this AMI works with the solar?
Yeah, we'll be able to do net metering with the solar. It'll all be, it's not, right now we're doing it by hand.
Yeah,
It'll be done automatically, and it's not a challenge.
so there's nothing different that has to be done?
2020.
Nothing, it's standard stuff nowadays.
So, we received the 5,000 meters from Kodiak Electric for free in 2020.
2020.
For free?
That is what it says on our
Do they want to buy them back?
Laserfish packet.
So
But,
basically,
you know.
that's 5 years, and it took about a year to get them all installed, so we really haven't used them that
Kari, do you
long.
have a,
I think that my memory serves me right, the meter change-out project was in 2018.
okay. So my initial Google search was incorrect at this time.
They were free.
Yeah, we got that in 2017.
Yeah. But we will find the answer to that question and get back to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question. The AMI, is there any security that, like, with it being into the tech space, is there any additional security that would need to take place?
No, that's all pretty well understood, right? This technology's been in for almost a decade throughout much of the industry. So while there are, with the computer, it would sit on our network and it would have to be, how do you say it? You'd have to have the correct cybersecurity infrastructure in place, which we have. But it's all set, that's all taken care of and has been worked through by the vendors at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns about that, so. And I do, one thing to remember, it's $1.2 million, you'd amortize these, my guess, over 15 years. So it's 1.2 divided by 15 is what actually hits the books, on an annualized basis.
So I did find the resolution. Sorry to interrupt again. So in 2017, we paid $178,000 for the meter changeover, but the meters were free from Kodiak. We just had to pay the cost of shipping. So we invested about $175,000 in 2017.
That's not labor, though. Labor's not included.
Yes, so the
That's-
contract was for labor
was the
to
cost.
install.
That's the labor.
Yeah.
So,
So the meters were free. We paid $175,000 to install them. So a good holdover while we make the decision to move to the next big step.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
thank you.
So that's the AMI project. I put together, updated the Gantt chart that we had last June to kind of reflect where we are right now, as far as when I see all these projects getting completed. I've got, as you can see, the long lead item on there, the longest item on there is the shore power 115 tap. And that's primarily, which stretches out till the end of 2027. That's primarily that long because getting the battery energy storage system is probably going to be a 12, 18 to 24-month process, getting that installed. So Nash Road Phase 1 from Sawmill to Spring Creek is complete. Nash Road Phase 2 from Sawmill to the Seward Highway. Our intent is to start that this summer. We'll ideally, if we get the funding approved, at the next council meeting, we'll bring you the resolution for procuring the long lead time items, which are the poles and insulators. We need to get those on order, and the wire. And then ideally, we'll have that project completed by the end of '25.
What is this?
Okay, am I going too fast? Or?
No,
I think
No,
it's
we
just,
can't
it's
see.
we're just trying to
tiny.
figure
Trying to
out
read it.
what the electrocardiogram type thing, what is
Oh, that's just a
that?
picture of an AMI meter. That's what you can see when you call into your AMI meter. Sorry.
I thought there was money.
No, that's
We were trying to read that.
That's just a picture. I'm just colored, otherwise it's just some black lines on a white piece of
Okay.
paper. You've got Nash Road, you've got a new port substation on the right, you've got
You
AMI
needed something to
meters.
fill the space.
That's
in the
very
center.
cool, thank you.
From, I think, Itron.
What kind of graph was that?
Yeah, an ECG.
So it's what you would see if you,
No,
That's what you would see if you
No.
logged in, if you were a
Yeah.
consumer and we had the meter data management system set up, and you wanted to log in and see what your usage was, you could call into the website and it would say, hey, this is what you look like for the last 24 hours or 72 hours.
Yeah.
So with the AMI metering, is there an app for the end user who you were talking about? I see head shaking, yes.
There is an app.
So the end user can really
Yeah.
can see
What's going on?
what's going on and see ways to save money from the first second that it's installed. And
Yeah.
I think that's
And
awesome.
we get a lot of inquiries
Great.
about,
Yeah.
folks about their bill.
Explain this,
It's amazing to
explain
me how many people come in and say, well, and usually it's an electric heater. If you got an electric heater, throw it away. But anyway, you get a lot of, you'd be able to do that with that. Anyhow, that was really just put up there as kind of.
Thank you.
To make it, dress up the black lines on white paper. So lawing sub, our intent is to have that completed by midsummer '26. Spring Hill shortly thereafter, that fall. In parallel, we'll be working the shore power. And then we would start the advanced metering, if we got funding. We go out to put out an RFP in April of this year with the intent of having that in service by the end of '26. And, then you're pretty much caught up. Kind of to give you an idea of where we are on the project overall, this is basically, let me explain these columns because it's a little bit it made sense to me when I did it, but I've been talking to some other people, they're like, what are you trying to say here? So let me just go through it. What you have is Nash Road Phase 1, you can see that our estimate was about $4.5 million. And if the project is complete in the status section, then the next number is where we're at as far as costs on it go. But if it's not complete, it's an estimate. Our best estimate at this point. That's why the second column, which was confusing, says 2025 actual/estimate. So you can see Nash Road's done. We were at 4.5. We came in about 4.1. Phase 2 was initially estimated at 1.2 million. In our current estimate, we're at a 95% design drawings. We have the bid package completed, and our engineer's estimate for that is 2.4 million. That's primarily, like I said, because we have to change out a bunch of poles that they didn't think we were going to have to change out when they went through there initially. Yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just so that I can answer the question when somebody asks me, there was no way for folks to know how many poles needed, like when they made the initial estimate?
No. Well, you have to design it, which
Okay.
now we're done with the design. I mean, you put
I
it into a PLS CAD as a program they use. It calculates under the National Electrical Safety Code, has these conditions you put in there. It calculates the sags of the wires and the clearance over the road and the sag between the communications conductors and the distribution and the transmission. And you have to kind of balance all that for different temperatures and loadings.
So nobody made a mistake in the
Nobody
estimate
made a
or the
mistake.
forecasting? It
Nope.
was just...
They
okay.
just, they went through and thought, those look like good poles, they're in
Got
pretty
it.
good shape, they look tall enough, should be good. We'll assume we're just gonna re-insulate those. But in fact, you couldn't just re-insulate them, you had to,
Okay.
to
Thank you.
change them out with taller poles. Seward Highway was the section from Lawing down to Fort Raymond, that was completed. Fort Raymond was at 7.1 million was the original estimate, came in about 6.7. Lawing was 3.2. And now what you'll see in both Lawing and Spring Creek, the estimates are really done in 2021 and given to us in 2022. They were 3,272 and 3,960,419. I've increased those by 10%. The reason the Lawing one doesn't show 110% is because the transformer for Lawing has already been acquired. It came when we bought it at the same time we bought the Fort Raymond transformers.
No inflation.
And there's a number in there, I'm gonna run it to ground, there's something, I just tell you right now, there's something not quite right with that number, but I haven't been able to run it to ground, so I'm gonna make sure that when I come back to you with a resolution, we'll have the right number. That number isn't quite right, I don't think, but I will dig that out. Then shore power, we thought initially that we were gonna have to come up with $1.4 million for that, but given the grant and the contribution from RCC, that'll be paid for entirely by grant funds and what you call contribution and aid to construction, so that's a good thing. And then you see in the last column, we got the AMI meters, which were not in the original estimate, they're at 1.2 million. So if you add all that up, you're at 23,039,816. We've currently funded 14.9 million of that. And so what is remaining to be funded is $8,749,090. That's what we need to come up with to finish the project. I think, yeah, I talked about everything. One here, I referenced the shore power estimate. Infrastructure plus BES is 30 million. As I said earlier on, the additional 15 million or 20 million of that is for expanding the dock and the low voltage equipment that Royal Caribbean will put in to tie into our new substation. So this kind of goes back to before my time, but what I've been told and looked through the details on, looked through the old documentation. You know, in March of 2022, I think Rob Montgomery came with I don't know who the city manager was there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can tackle this part.
You tackle it.
Yeah, I make these slides. I'll tackle it. Yeah. So, looking at the remaining project cost of $8.74 million, our recommendation is to go for the remainder of the bond. So, our initial bond request in March 2022 was for $19.5 million. Resolution 2022-023 was amended by council and approved a bond for $10 million to break the project into parts, moving forward efficiently and ensuring that the amounts bonded would cover the projects. We are now at that next phase of the project where we need to get those funds to cover the remaining portion. Our current balance on the project is $8.749 million with the inclusion of AMI metering. So all told, we're looking to get about $19 million in bonding at the end of the project. And none of these, by going out for the remainder of this bond, we will not require an increase in rates at all. And if you want to go to the next slide. So our bond assumptions that we currently have in place with the bond bank, if we were told by council tonight to move forward, would be a 20-year term, $10 million, which is project cost and the reserve amount to be held by a third party, issued through the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank at a rate of 3.9%, which is a screaming good rate if you've looked at mortgages any time. But to go over some additional considerations, as our team was kind of sitting down, if you want to go to the next slide, and coming up with ways to fund this, we also toyed with the idea of an internal loan from the general fund. And as we toyed around this idea, we realized that of a loan this high, we would have to liquidate and draw down from our city investments. And typically with that, we do a 12.5% interest rate for those internal loans. And we decided not to recommend that since it's more fiscally responsible to preserve the value and security of our investments, as it's the basis of our fiscal health as a municipality. And with such a low bond interest rate, taking money out of our investments does not seem fruitful at this time. So, the final slide, the best one.
I know.
Questions?
Oh, yes, we have a
I
question
have
here.
So, or a statement, if you will. So yes, so it sounds like Originally, we said it was gonna take 19 million, it looks like it's gonna take 19 million.
So actually, it's going to take about an addition, it's going to take more, but we were able to use MERV funding as
Right.
well to bring that down. And we're also including the AMI metering
Right.
portion. So it's
Which
an
wasn't in there
additional,
before.
was not in there before.
But in 2022, we didn't know anything about the possibility for shore power. In fact, when we talked about it through multiple meetings, we're like, yes, it could happen, but the chances of it happening anytime in the next 10 years, blah, 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 right? So we don't have to increase the utility rate. We get to borrow the rest of the money at 3.9%, which is cheap, cheap money. And by the time it's all said and done, let's not forget that we got a $45 million investment for the shore power. And if I understand correctly, that means that once we turn that on by 2027, correct?
12/31/27.
12/31/27.
1/1/28.
Okay, so then we instantly will start saving up to 2 hours worth of generator fuel cost. But I won't say
When
instantly.
we have
but-
outages, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we have outages, and we get to sell power
When
to
we
the
sell regulation.
sell regulation. Thank you.
Whatever that
I just wanted to make sure that it sounds like we're making money.
A couple questions. One on the bond, why don't we have to raise rates?
I'm going to let Brian answer that. He answers it better than I do.
What happens is, I mean, first of all, the debt service coverage on it, our revenue is high enough that we don't have to raise rates to meet the debt service coverage on the bond, right? So we have to raise rates just to hold money in reserve for the lender. In addition to that, these are long-lived assets, so they'll be amortized over 50 to 60 years. And when you take $8 million and you amortize it over 60 years and divide it by 50,000 kilowatt hours, the number gets, it's kind of in the noise.
So,
Okay.
Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But it also, the next question on that would be, when we set our rates at, what are we, 29 right now, or 28? It's hard to tell right now, I mean, because we're the winter rate right now, but we set that rate in foreseeing that we would need more money for this, right? That was part
Yes,
of
that was
rate.
part of it, yeah.
So what you're saying is that rate that we set is somehow alleviating our need to raise our rates now.
That's
Basically what we're saying.
That's true. The rates we set have enough, I'll call it freeboard in them to cover this because it's a very small number. What you'll see is the cost of power adjustment is significantly greater than this added on to our annual, our kilowatt hour rate. And I can run those numbers for you and come back and show you what that is. But, you know, in just conceptually, you're going to take $8 million, you're going to divide it by 60 years, and then you're going to divide that again by the 50,000 kilowatt hours that we sell a year here. And that number becomes very, very small. It just isn't, it doesn't move the needle.
But of course, all this is fluid right now because we don't know what's going on with cooking with gas fields and.
Those rates I'm saying, those rates are going to go up. What you
Right.
know about
Yeah,
that's
those
going to
are-
go up. And this is not even, it's noise with respect to what's going on there. It will be.
Okay, so, sorry, I'm gonna just, a couple other questions. We know that our diesels are in need of repair. And we haven't talked about cybersecurity, so I don't know I know when we originally put this package together, that was a cost. Is that already embedded in this project?
No, cybersecurity is not in there. Right now, the Reliability Council is embarking, I think they had their second meeting this week, on developing what are called critical infrastructure protection standards. That process will take about a year. When that process is done, those standards will go to the Regulatory Commission, and Dustin is our representative on that group, and he will be, my guess is he will come back and say, hey, this is what we have to do to implement those standards. But right now, we don't really know what that is, because the standards aren't in place yet.
So we have no idea what that's gonna cost?
We don't know what that's going to cost.
Do we have an idea of the generator and what those are gonna cost?
My guess is, maximum, it's about a $40 million project to replace that generating plant. And what we do have in the budget, if you recall this year, is a study to have someone, probably it'll be Black & Veatch or Worley Parsons, or we'll have a big, third-party engineer come in and look at the plant and give us some alternatives and say, hey, this is what you really ought to do with this plant. But if you were to replace those with those EMD units, which are all 1970 vintage train engines, basically, if you were to replace those with Wärtsiläs like they put up at EGS, small, they'd be much smaller than the ones at MEA's power plant, that would be about $40 million is that cost that, to replace that plant.
To replace it.
To replace it. If that's what they came back and said you ought to replace it, so that's as bad as it gets, and it's gonna be somewhere between where we are and that. Now, once again, those are amortized over 30 years. They don't hit the books all at once, it's amortized over 30 years. And if you were to replace it with a plant that had a competitive heat rate, you'd actually be able to sell economy energy into the grid and offset some of those costs. Right now, our heat rate is, and the heat rate is the number of British thermal units that are required to produce 1 megawatt hour of energy. So it's called MMBTU per megawatt hour. And our heat rate on that plant is higher than the units that don't run in the rail belt anymore. If you were to replace that with a modern plant, you'd reduce fuel costs by probably 25 or 30%.
But I guess my issue didn't.
That's a project down the road.
Yeah,
Right, I know,
that's not
but I
fair.
guess what my brain's doing right now is like, you're at MEA, former Chugach, so your economy of scale is so much bigger than here. We're what, 5,000
Oh, I'm
users?
very aware, but I am very aware of your economy
Yeah.
of scale. I watch it every day. It's,
Yeah.
I get it. It's.
And we just can't afford that, to raise those rates, so
Nope,
we
I
have to figure
totally
out how.
agree. Gotta figure out how to
We're
do
going to
it.
keep those rates at least where they are, and,
Keep the lights on.
yeah, keep the lights on.
No, and I totally understand how, I really do
Yeah.
get it. It's a small
Yeah.
number down here. The divisor, 50,000 kilowatt hours sounds like a lot, but in the rail belt, it's 4,900 gigawatt hours. So when it's 4,900 billion watt hours, that's what you're dividing everything by. So this is a very small number here, the divisor, so. But, what we need to do is go out, get the study done, come back, and then talk about it when we get there.
Kevin, you had a
Thank you,
question.
Madam Mayor. So with all of this we're investing, will this help lower the monthly adjustment rate, which averages 75 to 90% of what your electric bill has been?
This is not going to change, it's not going to change, what I'm going to say is your rates will go up slightly less than they might otherwise have gone up. I'm not being very careful about what I'm saying here. They are not going down. When Cook Inlet Gas, when we start bringing in, and I think Arthur will be in here to talk to you about it later, when they start bringing Pacific Rim LNG into Cook Inlet, right now Pacific Rim LNG is going at the wellhead between $12 and $15 per MMBTU. We're paying about $8 per MMBTU in the inlet right now.
And so this won't change anything about our power supply agreement with
Nope.
Chugach. This is about the infrastructure that we have as a city to sell the power that we purchase from Chugach. So there's no change for that, the Chugach side of it or that power supply. It's not helping, we're not generating any power, we're just making the power that we do buy be delivered more efficiently and safer.
Thank you, Kevin.
That's why I asked that question. I
Yeah.
wanted that clarity out there.
Rates are not going down. Losses
Yeah.
will be a little lower because your higher voltage has lower losses, so there is savings, but that's going to be in the noise compared to what you're going to see going on with particularly the fuel side of rates in the rail belt over the next several years.
Sorry.
Okay, just make sure. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
So on that note, we know that Anchorage is talking about if they had a tough winter or next winter, there might be some sort of rationing. And we would probably be on the low end total of that totem pole.
We will be the
We do-
first interrupted.
First interrupted.
We have an
We
interruptible
meaning
contract.
Seward
Seward.
or,
Seward as a customer.
and is that because?
Because our contract doesn't, our contract is an interruptible contract. It's a lower cost than it would be if it were a firm power contract. It's interruptible because we have our own generators down here and we have to pay for those. So we don't pay for Chugach's standby generators. They take that out of the rate. But when the line goes out, we have to start our generators and run them.
I guess the question then is, what is the generators, when we're running the generators, how much more, is it 100% more expensive per day or way more than, I can't remember.
Way more than
It's way more than that. But can we sell some of that power back out to any other towns?
Well, one of the things that we are working on, I don't want to get into the details, but in the negotiations for the power supply arrangement is, we have 16 megawatts of generation and a
Yeah.
peak load of 8 megawatts. If there is an interruption that's called for due to a lack of fuel, we would run our generators and serve probably initially Chugach load if they were interrupted, or other rail belt utilities. If for some reason Chugach wasn't interrupted, but MEA was, we would be able to sell that additional 8 megawatts, up to 15 megawatts to MEA through the system. We're working on that. So that you're actually making a little bit of money, I think is what you're.
Not at our rate, though. We wouldn't be charging.
When the lights are out, they don't really care what.
We could
the
charge
rate is.
whatever we want. No.
You know, but, you know, ideally, if they cut power, if there's a scheduled out, an unscheduled outage, if we have a fuel supply issue and there's a reduction that's called upon for the electric utilities, they'll begin to start all the diesel-fired generation in the rail belt. And there's a couple hundred megawatts up in Fairbanks, and their EGS can go, at MEA has 170 megawatts, they can go to oil for a couple days. You know, we would start our plant down here. Chugach has, I think, 30 megawatts of diesel-fired generation down at Plant 1. We will start all that up and serve as much electrical load as we can, and if we're exporting in that, then we will get paid for that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Great, so it is our intent to bring forward the resolutions necessary at the next council meeting to accept the bond funds, resolution to reimburse ourselves with bond funds, and then as well as a resolution to begin ordering the long lead items. So we wanted to have this infrastructure update tonight so you guys can kind of wrap your head around the projects and what we look forward to and what we plan on doing, and we'll bring that out at the next council meeting.
I do have one more
Oh,
question.
yeah,
Sorry.
we've got plenty of time. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
if there's audience people too, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
I know you guys have been looking at some of them, and I don't know if you can talk about it, but some sort of alternative or supplemental projects. Is there anything on that you can talk about for the city?
What I'd say is I think the city, and I think we'll probably bring something forward towards the end of the year, there ought to be a strategic generation plan for this utility. And we look at those things, and I think that's all I'd really talk about right now. But I think, you know, the way it starts is you start looking at all the alternatives, you get them all on a piece of paper, you start saying what makes sense. Because I do think that as the price of cook inlet gas, you know, as we begin to bring in LNG, and it's not going to, cook inlet gas isn't going to go away in 2028, but over the next couple decades, it's probably going to go away. As that happens, a lot of the economics for projects that previously didn't make any sense, with $2 an MCF gas and cook inlet or $7, they didn't make sense. We really need to go back and relook at those. So I think that's something that the utility, will work on that.
I have a slightly unrelated but sort of related question. People ask me, when we're on generation, would it make sense for people to conserve and use less, and therefore it would be better?
Oh, absolutely.
Why don't we let people know that then? Or, I mean,
Okay.
as a plan, I mean, because people, as soon as the power comes back on, you know, we have a little power outage and boom, we're on generator. I mean, people normally just use everything they would be using. And maybe they could cut back on things and save us some money if that were actually told to people. I've always wondered about it. I
I'll
mean, it
make a
seems,
note. No, it definitely, I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's just
I mean, it's
physics, right?
logic.
You got more load, you use more fuel.
but people don't
Yeah.
do that, I don't think.
I would say that I know that we tried some stuff in the municipality with the yellow, red, and green. I don't know
Yeah,
if you remember
those
that.
kind of things.
But what we found was when you told people we were in yellow, their load went up. Because they're trying to heat their house before the power goes out.
Yeah, there is.
So
Get the laundry done.
it was kind of an interesting thing. Everybody
Yeah.
kind of went, well, that wasn't exactly what we were trying to do.
Well, people ask me that. and
But no, I think you're
just-
right. I mean, if the community got behind it, so I've got a note here and. we'll
But the
talk
thing,
to Kat
if
about
you're
it.
running 16 megawatts of generator and your max peak is 8, it doesn't really matter, you're still running the machines.
No, well.
You're putting less load on them?
Yep. There's full speed no load, there's the energy it takes to get them up and run it, which doesn't produce any electricity, called full speed no load. And then there's the energy that you're putting in that's actually serving electrical load, right? Well, that portion of it is smaller if people turn their lights on. I was thinking it's interesting, we were having that discussion about yellow, red, and green a few days ago, and I remember my dad, when I was a kid in Anchorage, if the lights went out, he would run around the house and turn off all the lights.
My dad used to too.
And I was wondering, did everybody do that, or was that just my dad, because he was an electrical guy, But yeah, it's exactly what you're saying.
Okay,
So-
but just to let the public know that.
Okay, I'll make a note here.
Somehow.
And we can put it on
Try
the
it out.
Facebook page.
You can make a note to Anchorage, sorry, Julie.
Okay.
To the Anchorage, why don't they just put, I don't know how many houses are in Anchorage, there's 330 million people there, or 330,000 or 350,000 people. Why don't they put more solar, encourage solar to reduce the amount of gas they're using in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years?
I think that is actually happening. I believe that, you've got, although it was bad news from Renewable IPP, canceled the Puppy Dog Lake project, but those folks are working on that. I think there's an understanding in the rail belt that any kilowatt hour that we can generate off something that's not cooking with natural gas gives us a longer runway to get off of cooking with natural gas. That being said, it still has to pencil. You can't just raise rates. So the numbers have to work out. And I think that's the struggle everyone's going through right now, and kind of circles back to that point of having a strategic generation plan when we start relooking at some of those things. And in the past, if you're in the industry, you'd go, that's not a pencil, Gas is so cheap. Well, that's not going to be that way. It's going to ramp up over the next decade. So,
Julie,
This was going off what you were talking about the generators, and this is probably not going to be a popular thing for me to say, but coming from the lower 48, when the power went out, you go days without power, and I understand being here is different because of the temperature, but is there, is it a certain threshold that you, like, a certain temperature, yes, so we need to cut the generators on to keep the heat, but if it's, 45 degrees outside, do we have to cut the generators on right away?
need TV and save money. Just kidding.
I guess I'm just looking at it. We've lived here for 8 years, and the generators come on quick when the power goes out. They do, and that's a lot of money.
you can make choices like
Yeah,
that.
I just didn't know if there was, I didn't know if there was a reason, I guess, that's my question.
Well, Lee, who was my boss at Chugach, used to tell me, because I used to promote under frequency shed and lieu to spin. Anyway, I won't get into the details. I used to promote shed and lieu to spin, and he said, we're in the business of keeping the lights on, not turning them off. So, you couldn't do that if everybody agreed that that's what they wanted to do. But,
From the calls I get, the minute
Lower than the temperature.
We do also make a call towards the beginning of a power outage. If the power outage and the linemen are able to address the concern or the reason relatively quickly, we won't spin them up. But if it's something that's going to be longer, or like a large storm or something, it's definitely worthwhile to get those running.
No, we love our power and sewer, let me tell you from the calls I get. Kevin, you have something.
Because one, not turning them on, you're going to see an increase in elderly injuries. I'm sure of that. But has there been any talk of, this just popped in my head, about talking to Avtech of tying that windmill in?
I haven't talked to Avtech, but I have talked to a couple of wind guys. And I'll tell you, personally, it offends me every time I drive into this place and that thing is not spinning. So, but I don't know that we can do it. I don't know that we can do it. But
we have had some initial conversations.
We've had some
about
conversations about tying it. It'd be perfect. It's right there. We can.
We get plenty of wind.
Yep. No, I think so. It's on the list. But I haven't talked to Avtech. But Kat and I've talked, and I reached out to a couple of the wind developers and to kind of get some pricing. What would that cost them?
I'd like to see if anyone in the audience has any questions or comments. I see a lot of city people, but there's other people too, so does anybody have any questions or comments? Because this is a work session.
Madam Mayor, I might have one.
Yeah, sure.
I apologize for being late, but I was watching a video. My question is around the 12 megawatt battery system. Some of us were here back in the good old days with earthquakes and all this other crap that happened. That very poor soils where this has been identified to put, there's a very detailed engineering report on that. Right View is the name of it. It was a very expensive report. And the other thing is, that's in a crash zone for tidal waves. Why would a prudent design team put a major asset in two serious problems? Soils and given tidal wave zone. Why would we do that? Why wouldn't we relocate the emergency power to a separate or area that's not going to be inundated or slide in the next earthquake? That was my question.
That's a really good point, and I should say, this is a preliminary
Yes.
sketch, right? And what we're gonna do is, we'll do geotech, before we move forward, and as we move forward with the design, we'll do geotech. And actually, the BES can be relocated anywhere along that 115 line, but there are some parameters with the grant agreement, right? The grant, it has to be connected to the shore power system, so there are some parameters around that, so. But if the soil's bad there, I don't know. I mean, you apparently, that's already been done. But when we do the engineering, we'll do the geotech, and it will be designed to seismic zone 4, which is the seismic zone that we're in here. So maybe the answer when we get there, I'll come in and say, well, we moved the battery.
And how are we going to, excuse me, how are we going to offset a 20-foot tidal wave in that spot right there?
That's a good
very,
point.
very much inundated.
That's a really good point. We will definitely take that into consideration.
I mean, if this is our emergency power backup.
Thank you. It's a good point. Thanks.
Yeah,
Really good point.
I was here, I know. Yeah, I mean, things immediately get destroyed and.
Yep. No, that's a really good point. I shouldn't be clear. I mean, literally, the engineering that's gone into the shore power is that yellow line on the paper. It said, let's put the battery here in the substation there. There's a whole lot of work, much as what happened on Nash Road Phase 2.
Right.
Where we thought we were just going to go in and re-insulate, and now we're going, well, you can't do that once you do.
You're at the brainstorming stage?
We're at the brainstorming.
We are luckily at a good point too, where the engineering costs are included in the grant, so those will all be reimbursed by the EPA grant.
Okay, anybody else out there wanting to, okay, I'll bring it back to council then. Did you have something? No?
Sure.
Okay.
AK Tree Services has been cutting down the trees in the power line in Forest Acres. They do an awesome job. They're quick and they clean up the total mess. There's no branches or anything left. In fact, when I saw them driving up and down the road, I went out and introduced myself and said, these 2 trees of mine are directly underneath the power line. Instead of topping them and trimming them and just cut them off so you don't have to deal with them later, they said, we'd love to. And I went to work, forgot something, came back, and they were gone. The leaves were gone, I mean, the branches were gone, the trees were, and they were done. They're really fast and efficient. So they're moving south from Forest Acres now, so just be on the, see those white trucks right around, that's what they're
Awesome, thank you, Becky.
Thanks.
Good to hear. Good to hear, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they've been great to work with.
Okay, I'll bring it back to, any other questions from council? Ms. Bob? Oh, it's okay, look at the
I
time, we
should
got
have got into
time.
your business. This is pretty, you guys have really interesting business. I've told Taylor that before, I think it's really interesting, but.
You can keep talking for like 20 more minutes if you want.
Yeah, I can talk all day, right?
I could.
At least you showed up on time this time, though.
What other communities in the state have shore power? I know that Juneau does, but.
Juneau
Juneau
and
and
Whittier.
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 Juneau and Whittier, I believe, are the only two. I don't know if Skagway.
I don't know if
does.
Skagway
I don't
does.
think Skagway does. But I've never heard of it if they do. Don't know.
And do the cruise ships have, if we have it, the rule is they have to plug in, right?
So the cruise ships want to plug in, first and foremost. That's one of their priorities. But also, once the shore power is up and running, we will probably bring forth an ordinance that says that cruise ships have to plug in when they are in town, so that,
No emission.
yeah, so no emission from that.
That's the thing.
And then, so on the rates for them, that's probably negotiable with Royal Caribbean or the cruise ships that are tagging in. But they have a lot of power to leverage over us.
Well, what we're going to do is structure the rate so that it's the same rate through the Chugach Power Sales Agreement, Power Purchase Agreement. I'm just thinking here, I'm gonna be very careful. I think we're gonna cover that in the rate with Chugach, so let's leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have good examples of how to work through that as well, so it'll
Yeah.
definitely be beneficial.
I have a rate, because they charge my boat, that's pretty much double a residential, you could use that rate.
Yeah.
I have some friends who have boats, but I'm not going there.
Okay, any other questions?
And now if we can just get the internet company to quit loading the cruise ships and killing the town with their internet when they're in. We'll figure that one out.
Yeah, that's another one.
Thanks for all the work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you so much.
this was
Thank you.
very,
Thanks for
very
the
clear.
opportunity. I hope I didn't
So just
use
for
too many
some-
acronyms that nobody understood. If you
Just
have
for
any
some
questions-
some final parting thoughts of what to expect at the next council meeting, for everyone to be aware, we will be bringing forth the bond resolutions as well as the purchasing for the equipment, the long lead time equipment, including the AMI meters and everything like that, so, just to get your brains working.
Okay.
Great, thank
Anything
you.
else for the good of the order? Okay, I will adjourn this work session at 6:30, and we'll be back at